It is February the 4th, Friday, February 4th, first Friday of the month, and we're going to do our live today to talk about month 2 for Garden Party Down Under. The block of the month pattern, of course, is it's a perk of membership to the Quilt Show. In addition to all the other great things that you have a wonderful block of the month pattern that's available all year long. I'll be looking for your questions at the end of today's talk, and I don't have a whole lot to talk to you today, so we shouldn't run more than 30 minutes. But anyway, I will be looking at questions. So if you have any specific questions or things you'd like me to show you on the website, please put those in your comments and I will go and look. I can't see them now while we're recording because I can't the way it's set up, but I'll be able to check them for you. So this month is a really lovely vine applique border that goes around the center block. Let me just say that the first month I think was the most time consuming of the entire quilt, and so you're going to like how it goes from here forward. I don't think this month was tremendously difficult or time consuming like the first one was. So, but it's just a beautiful vine and I really like it, and I'll probably use it again in other quilts. It's just simple and yet elegant and really pretty. So I'm going to switch to the document camera now so I can show you a few things up close. Okay, so the first thing is that you'll be aware of the way the pattern works for this month. We have the vine border that goes around. This was the center that was done month 1, and then we have the vine border, and ultimately we'll have, this is called border 2, the vine border, and then we'll have a dogtooth border that goes around the outside edge of this to complete month 2. The vine is very important that it go in and out the way Irene Blanck has designed it, where the vine goes up on the outside and then comes into this basket handle. This is what's going to be part of the basket, and the remainder of the basket will be up here in the dogtooth border. So you'll notice that the vines go in and out of the border in a very specific way. So let's take a look at the patterns. You have a half pattern. Irene has provided a half pattern. We know that because it says right here on the outside, center line mirror pattern at this point. In order for you to be sure that you have the right size, you need to put these pages together and measure them. The border itself, the vine border, when it's completed, is 23 inches long, finished when it's sewn into the quilt. So from the center to this outside solid line, the finish line is half of 23. And my calculator tells me that that's 11.5 inches. So when you're lining these pages up where it tells you to join them, before you secure them with tape or glue or however you use it, make certain that you double check that you are at from center to the final line, not this outside line because that includes the seam allowance, but yet this inner, the finish line is 11.5. That is half of the finished size of the border. It will give you the size that you need. Then you've got your background, your border fabrics to prepare. There are 4 of them, 4 borders, and they are 23.5 inches. Because it's 23 finished, we need a 1/4 inch on either side, 23.5. And it's 5 inches high, so it's 5.5 cut. So you'll need 4 borders that are 23.5. I'm using the kit fabrics. This is not one of these. This is just for our demo today. But I used the kit fabrics, and I wanted to be careful not to use more than I needed to. So I ended up cutting 3 widths of fabric, which is about 40, 41 inches, something like that. 3 of them to make all 4 of the borders. The first 3 strips with the fabric, I was able to cut a 23.5 without a seam. But then the 4th one, I just took 2 of the leftover pieces and sewed those together and measured that, and I put the seam exactly at midpoint. I'm going to show you that in a minute when I show you the quilt. And I was willing to do that. If you don't want a seam anywhere, you would cut 4 widths of fabric and then 5.5 inches wide each, and then cut each one into 23.5 inch long, and have those leftover pieces you'll be able to use later on, hopefully for something else. So the trick with this now is to get the markings on here so you know where to place the vines. here's the center. So I want to work with my fold at the center. And I'm going to put that right here. Now, I don't have a light box under here, but obviously I would have a light box when I was doing this. But I can actually see this well enough. And yes, you can see that too. My marker of choice is a mechanical pencil with a very light touch in a place that they're not going to be seen. And when I mark the vines, I simply mark very lightly a line that is in between. Here's the two lines. I would draw a line that is with a pencil just lightly in between to give me an idea of where to place the vine. And I would get this on this side. I also marked each of these little stems. These are 1/8 of an inch stems for the 48 leaves that are in this quilt, in this border. There are 12 leaves on each of the 4 borders. And so I simply, again, drew a little line. And because I was marking this as I went and just going to do one border at a time, I used this Quilter Select self-erase marker. It works great. It does erase on its own. And I just made myself a little line right there on each of those small vine lines to show my, again, not trying to draw, I didn't draw both lines. I only put one in the middle where it would go. And so that got this half done. Now we need to mark the other half. And here is the part that you need to be aware of. I showed this in the video, so hopefully if you've gotten to this stage, you've watched the video. Here's the center. So I can't just slide this over here because here's my center and that wouldn't work. So in order to make this work, you would have to turn this upside down in order to get this placed. And with a light box, I could still see through it. But even better for a situation like this is to print the pattern on vellum, which is tracing paper. And there's only one thing to be aware of, probably two things. First, it's lightweight paper and it can jam up going through your printer. So I would print one page at a time. Just put the piece of vellum there, print that page, go now to print the next page and put another piece of vellum. If you stack it up, you can have a problem getting it through the printer. The other problem is that this is kind of a slick, almost a slick kind of a paper, and ink tends to pool on it and it needs time to dry. So be careful when you take this out of your printer that you let it dry. Give it 4 or 5 minutes to just let it soak into the paper, leave it set. And be careful when you got these blobs like this one here that you don't touch it, because you're going to get that black ink on your hands and you don't want black ink on your fabric. But here's the advantage to being able to use this method. Okay, so I've got this printed here and I can tell that this is the left-hand side because the words are up and I see the middle on this side. Then I turn it over and again I've got the center over here and I can see that this is upside down, but I'm putting the vines where they need to go. Let me show you what it looks like on the quilt, which I just happen to have right here. Okay. This is my month 1 and 2 from the kit fabrics. Okay. So let me lay this here, and you can see that when I, turn it this way first. Here's my center from the center out. And I've got the vine going the way it should. And it's important the way the vine goes because the vine is going to come into this basket. And it needs to come, this lower one has to come in this direction and the one on the other side has to come from the other side. So here's how this one looks. And when if I just slid this over, this turned it around and slid it over to align the middle, which is what most of us would do, that wouldn't work because now your upper vine is going on this side instead of down below where it belongs. So by printing on vellum and turning it upside down, I can see exactly that I've got these vines the way they need to go. There are 4 vines and every one of them is done this way. The vine coming out of the center down to the bottom and then going into the baskets in that way. So that's a nifty thing with vellum. It makes it easy to see. The other thing to be aware of, as I just mentioned, we were just talking about these corners here. The instructions tell you that you'll need 8 pieces of 1/4 inch vine prepared in whatever method you want to use. And you put them from the center to the outside edge and leave 4 inches loose. And that's a problem because everything in you is going to want to chop that off even with the end of the fabric. Don't do that on the background. These need to be left. All 4 of these borders need to have the 2 ends left so that when you have joined all of the 4 vine borders together, you can go ahead and complete the vine without having a seam right here at a place that would be difficult to do. And again, that shows on the pattern here how this is going to work. This comes in here. So you leave the long pieces hanging. They're pressed, of course, and ready to go. When you have all the 4 borders on, then you're ready to go and stick these pieces in here. And so all I had to do was, I knew where the spot was. I opened up about an inch here of the seam. Remember when I sewed these, made the baskets, you actually make big half square triangles. And I just went in and opened up those seams. And now that I've got all of them on, I'm ready to slide this in here. Just kind of tuck him in there. And it's always hard to do on camera. Make sure it's tucked under, and I either use a dot of glue or a couple pins, and it would be ready to go back into whatever method you used for your applique of the vine. I machine applique, so I would simply start back up here and go down and applique this side and come and do the other side as well. When I have those in, and of course I have to do the one on this side also, then I went back to the back side and finished, close that seam again. So it's about an inch long. You see the threads, I just left the threads right there. I could go and sew that up again. And if you have excess down here, as you probably will, you would cut it even after you've sewn it in place so that it's ready to go. And then it looks like, here's a finished one on this side. Okay. So the vines come into the basket this way, go out to the basket that way. And the bottom of the basket is this foot. If you looked at my blog, you saw my little funny, and I won't talk about it here, but we all make mistakes, and a photograph's the best way to find those mistakes. So that is one of the things to be aware of with this beautiful vine border. Now there's another thing to be aware of, and that's that there are 8 leaves that dangle. I call these the little danglers. They hang down onto the dogtooth border. So when I made them and was getting these all ready, I made my stems, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I use satin stitch, and the stem is fine. The stem is up here on this border. You can clearly see that this stem is still on the background of the vine border. It's the leaf that's going to come over into the dogtooth border. And so because of that, you need to have this all done before you can applique the final 8 leaves, those dangler leaves on there. There's one on this side, and there's one on this side, over here. And then there are, of course, the other 3 sides have those as well. So what I decided to do about the vines, these little stems, this is the vine, it's a 1/4 inch, and then the little stems are about 1/8 of an inch. So there are lots of ways you can do it. There are Karen K. Buckley has a product called Perfect Stems that are plastic bias bars, and the smallest size in there will make 1/8 of an inch bias bars, and you can do that. I decided that I would do satin stitch, which is just a zigzag that's sewn quite close together, and I decided I would do that for speed. On my quilt, so we did this on the practice quilt, Brenda, who made the sample quilt, she did month 2, and so she did it this way. You could also do hand embroidery. I have seen people on month 1 who used rickrack, narrow little rickrack for the tiny little 1/8 of an inch stems. That was brilliant. There is even 1/8 of an inch wide ribbon. I'll bet you could find a pretty green ribbon that you might like, and that's 1/8 of an inch wide or so, about that. And you can put it in place there and just stitch, even a ribbon, you could stitch right down the middle of it. If you used green thread that was a real close match to the ribbon, that would be a breeze, and get those in place there. You don't have to tie off the threads. You don't have to pull them to the back and knot them off, because one end of the raw edge will be under the vine and one end will be under the leaf. But I did mine with satin stitch, which is a zigzag. On my machine, my Bernina, I set it for 4.5 wide and 0.15 in length. That means that's how close the stitches were together. Just check it. You may even have some wonderful decorative stitches that might look really nice as an 1/8 of an inch vine. So look and see. I know my machine probably has 500 stitches and I use 2 of them basically. So it would be worth looking at to see if there's some other options. So that's my tip for if you want to do fast and speedy. Now, in order to do embroidery, machine embroidery, like a zigzag stitch on there, I need some sort of stabilizer behind this, or you get what's called tunneling, which means that the fabric tends to pull up and you get this little kind of a groove or a tunnel on the back. So what I did was, again, I had used this marker. You could even use a narrow pencil if you wanted to, light touch. I put my lines on there, and then I have tons of this, and I know you do too. This is the leftover print and piece fused on the back. I got lots of these pieces left. So I simply, working with my border, when I had those lines marked, I turned it over and went to the iron. On these pieces where they're close together, I just took a piece of this that would cover those both lines. I could see them through here. Just cut this off, lightly fused it to the back. I'm not securing it forever. I just want to hold it there long enough to do the stitching. When the stitching, so I had 2 here and I had a piece here and another piece over here and one over there. Once the stitching had been done all the way, for I did all 12 of these and I took the border then out of my sewing machine, it was super easy. I didn't have to wet it. I just tore these pieces off. It was like a tearaway stabilizer. It came right up because I didn't try to fuse it permanently. I just wanted to get it the whole long enough that I could do my stitching. And that was great. That was super easy, and it tore right off with no problems at all. I was very pleased with that. So another suggestion that I'll make for you is, see, I make the mistake so you don't have to. I do different things and go, well, you know, it probably would have been easier to do it a different way. So the first thing I did was I cut these yellow circles out the size that they're supposed to be. And you have that shape again on the pattern where we've got half the pattern. So I knew what size this was supposed to be, the circle, and I cut it out 1/4 of an inch bigger all the way around. And then I made my little petals, and then I put those on top of the yellow circle was not sewn yet to the border. It was just by itself. And then I put my 6 petals on there and the little circle in the middle. Well, because I had used the actual size of this circle, the big circle, man, I had to try to really get those lined up as close to exactly in the middle as possible. So hindsight was 2020, and I said, you know what? Next time, I would have cut a 5-inch square of yellow, just a hunk of yellow. Applique, again, you can see how they're supposed to look here, where they go, and put those petals onto the square of yellow. Get them all appliqued in place, plus the center, and then I can use the pattern to draw on the yellow square and make sure that I have lined up the petals just right. So even if I haven't sewn them exactly in the middle of the 5-inch square, I have enough room that I can move it over and back and forth to get it lined up. But I had done it probably as hard as it could be done by making all 4 of the big circles first. Shouldn't have done that. So anyway, so that's my suggestion, is that you consider that. Because I'm using kit fabrics, and many of you are as well, I know there's always concern that you're going to run out. I hear that a lot, and people want me to tell them exactly which fabric goes where, and there is no exactly which fabric goes where. They weren't selected that way. They were selected for total yardage, with the exception of the border fabric for the outside diamond border, which hopefully you have put away. It was a gray and white stripe, 1 yard and 3/8, I think. And the 5/8 or so of a blue fabric that was for the binding. And those were to be put away. And remember where you put them, because you'll need them in November. But just select something else. So I used a different fabric for my number 2 month than I did for my number 1. And in order to save a little fabric, from when I cut the back, these border fabrics, I cut 3 strips with the fabric, 5.5 by the width of fabric, which is about 40 or so. And I made 3 of them without a seam, just measured exactly so that I had the measurement. And I want to talk about the measurement again too in a second. And then I took the remaining leftover pieces and I pieced those together exactly in the middle, measured out from the middle. And I do have a seam right here, but I have to be this close to see it. Of course, you cover up most of it with the big circle, and then I'm going to do quilting stitches out there in probably white thread, and you'll never see those lines. So that was a way that I could save cutting one more entire width of fabric from the kit fabric, this particular white that I used. You can choose a different white if you want. Okay, I want to go back for a second. I had neglected to talk exactly about the sizing, and I'm going to use this one to see it a little bit better on the surface here. Okay. In order for you to know for sure that the pattern is the right size, you just have to know what sizes it's supposed to be. And the instructions clearly tell you that the border is 23 inches finished along the 4 borders along the center of the quilt. That means from this dark line here, which is the finished line, to the center is half of 23. And my calculator tells me that that's 11 and a half. So when you go to secure these 2 pieces of the paper together, put them where you think they go, and before you make it final, check and make sure that you have a pattern that is now 11 and a half from this finished line to the center. And that's going, I did the same thing with this, with the vellum one. That way you know that it's the correct size. All right, with appliques, that's what's important. And if it was slightly narrower or slightly wider, you can adjust it a little bit wider, a little bit narrower. And applique is so forgiving in that you can move things around as you need to. It just needs to be pretty close to that. But when you line up the papers, make it exactly right. 11 and a half, which is half of 23. Okay. So I've got that covered. Now let's talk about the dogtooth border. Okay. Okay, this dogtooth border is the exact same size as the first one from month 1, which is way in here someplace. Oh yeah, you can't see that if I hold it up to myself. And so this is the dogtooth border on the outside. Remember those dangling leaves. Once the 4 dogtooth borders are added all the way around to your center, including the vine applique border, then you'll go back and add those remaining 8 leaves. There's 2 on each border, 1 on this side, 1 on the opposite side. What is important about the dogtooth border, and I used my paper piecing border. I much prefer to paper piece than I would to hand applique or even machine applique. And you want straight of grain along this outside edge. When you cut these triangles, they have 3 sides because they're a triangle. 1 is straight of grain and 2 are bias. They're not pure bias, which is a 45-degree angle, but they're still bias. And you don't want to put bias around the outside edge if you don't have to. And in this case, you don't have to. So let's talk a little bit about, oh good, we're moving along here time-wise. Let's talk about the borders. Okay. This is my pattern that I came up with for the borders. And someone asked on the forum just this morning, and I answered the question is, do you have to print 2 sets of these? And the answer is yes. There are 4 pages of, this is the PDF that I did for the borders. And this border is 33 inches finished from edge to edge because it's the outside edge. It includes the borders that we've put on when you do the applique borders. So there are 4 pages. When you print the first set of 4 pages, this is a set of borders, there's 4 pages, and this is a set of paper piecing borders that are 4 pages. I always like to put the numbers on here, 1, 2, 3, 4. It tells me that this is the one that's going to get a fabric on it, and this is the one that's going to have white on it. If you are using Irene's method of appliquing the dogtooth borders, her pattern is only halfway, and again it's marked. It says, center, mirror image. There are 11 triangles of color. So this would have been a color, and my little pencil wouldn't work. This would be a color, this would be a color. And the same thing with hers. It's marked on there that you can see it. I don't think I got it out of the book. But that would show you how those are done. And hers don't come quite up here because they're applique, so it's about a 1/2 inch drop down. Whichever method you used for the first one is probably the best to use for the second one that goes on the outside edge. But for the paper piecing one, if you're going to sew through the paper where you actually need complete sets of the borders, you'll print these 4 pages twice to give you the total of 4 border patterns. All right. Now, I also found it helpful to make myself a paper template. This is just out of a piece of freezer paper. And it's the size template that it says it's supposed to be for the pattern. I can just put it right on here and see. And then I added a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. I also marked it for myself that this is the grain line. So this is my bottom. I wrote oversized, and this is the edge. I'll just use this marker so you can see it clearly. This one is going to show me that that's the straight of grain along the outside edge. Then I cut my triangles this size, and I have there are 11 colored ones on each border, so there's 44 colored ones, and there are 10 of the white ones plus a half piece. And the half ones are not just this cut in half. They need to be wider than that because of seam allowance. But you'll see that as you go and make them. You've already done that when you made the first one. But then I can just found that these are easier as you go to place these. This being oversized, you get a little extra. If you cut these exactly the size they're supposed to be, you must line it up on the paper precisely and exactly, and that's challenging to do. So that's just FYI of how I made that to cut those borders. So let me see if there's anything on here I want to show you, and then I'm going to go look for pictures. Okay, all right. I did the squares. I hadn't done these double circles yet for this inner border, so I did use squares of fabric for that when I realized that that would be easier. Okay, let me see. Now, someone mentioned this, and they said it on the forum as they looked at the pictures, that this is actually a pretty nice size. And we're going to go back to the webcam now. All righty. Go back over here because I'm doing. All right. So that this is a nice size as a wall hanging when you see it all done. And on my blog, I had the two pictures, the one of this, and then the oops picture at the bottom. If you haven't seen that and you want to laugh, go take a look. And the blog will show you. But it is a good size, and so I've decided that this is done for me. This is going to be a wall hanging just like this. I'm not going to add anything more to it. But because I'll continue to do demos for you as the year goes along, then I'm going to keep making the pieces. And I've already done the month 3 videos. They were done yesterday. And I've got to write the blog for month 3 yet, but that's coming along. But I'm going to take those and put those together into some smaller units too. So I'm going to have several wall hangings when I get done of this. I don't need another one of those quilts. I love that one so much. I love the fabrics. I love the fact that 9 of us worked on it. I love how great the quilting came out, and I did the quilting and I was real tickled with the designs they came up with. So I'm not going to make another one just like it, but I'm going to keep making parts. So that's just a thought. Okay, let me go see if there are any questions. Alrighty. Okay. See if I can start at the beginning. Lakeland. Oh, good. Everybody tells me where they're from, which is really neat. Galena, Washington. I know some of you are buried in snow and cold and wet. Massachusetts. All right, North Carolina. We're just kind of cold and gray here today, but hey, there's Margot. And Rondi. Okay, I'm glad that a couple people say they like the videos. It takes time to do those. And usually if it's a 10-minute or 12-minute video, I did it 3 times before I finally got it right. The phone rings halfway through and those kind of things. So I do put a lot of time and effort into those so that I can show you what the instructions are trying to tell you to do. So that's good. There's Elena. I am devoted. I love teaching students. Is the quilt piece you are using today? No. The question is I think the question is the background fabric that I'm using from the kit fabrics? No, because I've made all the borders again. I just went in my closet and took a piece of white on white that I was willing to cut a hunk out of, and I cut a 5.5 inch strip and trimmed it down to 23.5 by 5.5. The quilt itself is made from all kit fabrics with a few of my own. Some of my own favorite ones seem to just insist on jumping in there. Did I use print and piece fuse light to turn under the big circle? No, I have, Karen K. Buckley has 2 sets of circles. Most of us have her perfect circles, the standard size set, and then she's got a big circles, and I happen to have that set, and don't you know, one of those big circles is the size that I needed. So that's a great question. The print and fuse that wouldn't give me enough stability, I think, but you could use a piece of cardboard for those. You're only making 4 of those big circles, and you could use just a piece of cardboard in the proper size of the circle. Don't saturate it with water or starch. Just use a good hot dry iron to kind of get it in there. I would do the same thing with the um, uh, gathering stitches and pull it around the cardboard. That's how I would do that. It's a great question. The question says, can you use Ricky Stable stuff for paper piecing? I don't know. Probably. I don't think his has a fusible on the back. But for paper piecing, you probably could. Great. Yeah, I stand those poor folks in Kentucky. Boy, you have had a year up there in Kentucky. Hopefully the sun will come out again. Sawtooth. Did you cut the sawtooth pattern in half down the middle? I didn't make the dogtooth border. I put those together in the same way that I showed you where you make the vine border where you cut them, measure them before you tape them together, make sure that they're the right size. I did the same thing with my paper pieced border. There are 4 on my border, my paper piece pattern. There are 4 pages, and when you go and put those together, after you tape them or glue them, whatever method you use, make sure it's 33 inches finished. There is there are 11 triangles. So that means there's 1 in the center and 5 on either side of center. So I suppose you could make it in a half and then just add 1 more triangle to give you that 11th one when you join 2 halves together, but that's not how I did it. I made all 33 inches, 33 and a half with seam allowance, paper pieced onto that, and then removed all of the paper. Someone asked that question too, when do you remove the paper? I remove the paper as soon as the border's finished because it's done its job. And then I'm just using regular piecing at that point. I've trimmed it to the right size. Those outside dogtooth border is 33 and a half by 3 because it's going to be 2.5 inches finished. When I have that paper comes right off for me. I do not try to sew the border onto the middle of the quilt with the paper still in place. I don't find I have very much success with that at all. Oh, good. You replay the videos. Good. Good. I'll think of you every time I'm making them because it takes some time. Somebody says Irene's quilt has 7 leaves on each section of the vine close to the baskets. I'd have to look at that. I know she revised her pattern once she got started, so she may have added another leaf that isn't in if you saw an early photograph. Love the videos, love teaching techniques. Oh, good. Okay, thank you, Christy. That's really nice to see there. All righty, I love the Dresden Dresden blocks on my wall. And okay, good. Super. All right, let me come back to myself now. Okay. Yeah, those are kind of fun blocks over there. I've got some other things going on that I want to do. I'm in the middle of quilting a quilt that's 110 inches by 110 inches, and I foolishly thought it would take 2 weeks, and now it's like, it's going to be 4 or 5 weeks, and our Guild Quilt Show is the 3rd week in March, so yeah, I'm busy. Okay, I think that's, I'm excited about, I always work ahead, obviously. So yesterday I did the videos for month 3, and there are 2 videos for month 3. One is on the little tiny Dresden plates. We're going to start making piece blocks next month. And one of the great things about this pattern, when I made the sample quilt last year, that I thought, they are going to love this, because next month, month 3, you'll get the instructions for the piece block, and which is 4 patches on point, the first piece blocks. There are 2 different piece blocks, and there are 2 of them. So you don't have to wait till April to get the second set of instructions for the same exact block. You have that instructions already. So those of you who are speedy and like to get ahead will be able to make 2 of the piece blocks, 4 patches on point. And then the Dresden plates, Irene's pattern has those centered in each of the 6 piece blocks. Well, I chose not to do that. I did 2 of them, and I'll give you some options for some other things that you might decide you want to do for speed. We had, I had a limited amount of time and 9 of us working on it. So you'll see all of those things in the 2 videos. One is on piecing, how you piece those little blocks, and the other one's on the Dresden plates. I encourage you to put your pictures up on the forum, and I check the forum several times a day. It's so exciting to see all of you getting so much done. There are dramatic ones with dark backgrounds and bright ones. There's a beautiful one, and I'm sorry I forget your name, who used the Japanese taupe fabrics, the daiwabo woven. Oh my goodness, that is so pretty, and couldn't look any more different from Irene's or mine with those soft woven grade tone fabrics. It's beautiful. And there's bright ones and dark backgrounds, and just really exciting. If you're struggling to put how to put your pictures up, most people find their pictures are too large coming off your phone. Or, go to search the forum right there on the forum. It's a little box on the left, and type in uploading photos. And it will take you to several posts, but the first post is probably the one I want you to find. I wrote it on July 29th this past year, and it's step-by-step instructions on how to do it and how to resize your photos if they're too large. So it's not magic. You just have to know how it works and how to make it work for yourself. So I hope you'll take a look at that so you can share your pictures with us. And then remember, you can click on photos when you're on the forum, especially when you're on the forum, like show your progress here. That's the place I want you to put your pictures. I have one for month 1, and I have a new one for month 2, and come March, we'll have one for month 3, so that you can click on the photos and see what people have posted. Just see the photos without having to scroll through and read all of the information. So, okay, I will see you all again on the first Friday in March, which happens to be March 4th. And until then, that's a wrap.